There comes a moment in every super empath's life when they realize that love does not mean losing yourself, that caring deeply does not require chasing endlessly, and that the most powerful thing you can do is not to speak louder, explain harder, or give more, but to become still. You see, when you are someone who feels deeply, you are naturally inclined to fix, to soothe, to reach across the distance and close the gap. You sense the shift in tone, you notice the pullback, you feel the subtle withdrawal long before words are spoken, and your instinct says, do something, say something, restore it. But here is the truth. The moment you chase someone who is pulling away, you teach them that distance earns them devotion. Silence is the moment you decide that your worth is not up for negotiation. When you choose silence, you are not playing games. You are breaking patterns. You are stepping out of a dynamic where your love was becoming currency. You are saying, without words, I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. And that changes everything. Because silence does something powerful. It creates space, and space reveals truth. When you are always there, filling every gap, smoothing every tension, explaining every misunderstanding, the other person never has to confront their own behavior. They never have to feel the weight of their inconsistency. They never have to question what they might lose. But when you go quiet, not cold, not cruel, just grounded, something shifts. The anxious energy disappears, the over-explaining stops, the emotional chasing dissolves, and suddenly the dynamic is no longer fueled by your effort. Silence forces clarity. It forces the other person to ask, what just changed? And what changed is this. You chose yourself. A super empath's silence is powerful because it is not rooted in fear. It is rooted in certainty. Certainty that your value does not increase the harder you try. Certainty that real connection does not require convincing. Certainty that love should move towards you freely, not reluctantly. When you stop trying to pull someone closer, you discover something profound. The right people lean in without force. There is a divine principle at work here. What chases runs. What stands firm attracts. Energy responds to stability. And when you embody calm strength, you become magnetic in a way that no amount of emotional persuasion could ever achieve. Silence says, I trust myself enough to wait. Silence says, I will not beg for clarity, I will observe. Silence says, if you value me, you will step forward. And here is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be chosen is often the moment you finally are. But even more importantly, silence protects your heart. It gives you the distance to see clearly, to evaluate actions over promises, to notice consistency over charm, to decide from strength rather than longing. This is not about manipulation. It is about alignment. When you are aligned with your worth, you do not need to announce it. You do not need to threaten withdrawal. You simply become unavailable for anything less than respect. And that energy is felt. The super empath's greatest transformation happens when they realize that their love is sacred, that their emotional depth is a gift, not a resource to be drained, that their compassion must include themselves. Silence becomes sacred ground. In that silence, you reclaim your power. You reconnect with your intuition. You remember who you were before you started overextending, and something extraordinary happens. The pull loses its power. You are no longer reacting to every fluctuation in attention. You are no longer measuring your worth by someone else's responsiveness. You are steady, and steadiness is strength. If someone truly values you, your silence will not push them away. It will wake them up. And if it does push them away, it was never alignment to begin with. That is the liberation. You do not have to fight for love. You do not have to convince someone of your value. You do not have to exhaust yourself proving your heart. Sometimes the strongest message you will ever send is the one you never speak. Because beyond the pull, beyond the anxiety, beyond the urge to fix and chase lies your greatest power. A quiet, unshakable certainty that says, I am whole, I am grounded, and I will only meet you where respect lives. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world that rewards the loudest voice, the quickest reply, the most immediate reaction, choosing not to speak can look like surrender. But for the super empath, silence is not surrender. It is self-respect in its purest form. It is the moment you stop performing for validation and start honoring your own emotional dignity. When you care deeply, your instinct is to explain yourself, to clarify your intentions, to reassure the other person. You want harmony, you want understanding, you want connection. So when tension arises, you move toward it. You reach out. You try to fix it. And sometimes, in doing so, you abandon your own boundaries. Emotional self-respect begins when you realize that not every discomfort requires your immediate response. Not every shift in energy demands that you rush in to stabilize it. Silence becomes the space where you pause and ask, am I speaking to express myself, or am I speaking to prevent them from leaving? That question changes everything. Because when your words are driven by fear, fear of losing them, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough, you give your power away. You begin negotiating your worth. You start over-explaining simple standards. You soften boundaries that were meant to protect you. And slowly, your emotional generosity becomes an unspoken obligation. Silence interrupts that pattern. It is the decision to sit with discomfort instead of scrambling to erase it. It is the refusal to chase reassurance from someone who has not earned access to your vulnerability. It is the quiet confidence that says, if you misunderstood me, I trust that clarity will come. If you value me, you will seek to understand. This is not about playing games. It is about refusing to participate in dynamics that diminish you. When you immediately respond to every inconsistency, you teach people that your presence is automatic. When you fill every silence, you remove the space where accountability grows. But when you choose silence intentionally, you create a boundary that does not need to be announced. Silence communicates standards without confrontation. It says, I am not here to convince you of my value. It says, I will not beg for emotional safety. It says, I trust myself enough to wait. And that trust is powerful. Emotional self-respect is not loud. It does not threaten. It does not demand. It simply stands firm. It recognizes that your time, energy, and emotional availability are precious. Not everyone deserves immediate access to them. The super empath often believes that love must be demonstrated constantly, that care must be proven repeatedly. But love that requires endless proof is not secure love. It is unstable attachment. And silence is the first step toward stability. When you choose not to over-explain, you allow your actions to speak. When you choose not to chase, you allow the other person to reveal their intentions. When you choose not to argue for your worth, you allow reality to sort itself out. Silence gives you perspective. In that quiet space, you can observe patterns. You can see whether someone leans in or drifts away. You can evaluate whether their effort matches yours. You are no longer reacting from emotion. You are responding from awareness, and awareness protects you. There is a deeper principle here. What you tolerate teaches others how to treat you. If every time someone pulls back, you push forward harder, the imbalance becomes normalized. But when you step back and allow silence to settle, you reset the dynamic. You show that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. For the super empath, this can feel uncomfortable at first. You are wired to connect, to soothe, to repair, but emotional self-respect requires restraint. It requires the strength to let someone feel your absence if they have not valued your presence. Silence becomes sacred because it reconnects you with yourself. It reminds you that you are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. You are not obligated to fix what you did not break. You are not required to overextend to earn consistency. When your silence comes from calm certainty rather than resentment, it transforms you, it steadies you, it protects you. And in that protection, you rediscover something profound. You are worthy of love that does not need to be chased, explained, or negotiated. The super empath's power has never been in how intensely they feel. It has always been in how consciously they choose to respond. There is a profound difference between reacting from emotion and responding from awareness. One is impulsive, driven by fear or hurt. The other is intentional, grounded in self-trust. And the moment you master that fear, everything changes. When you are deeply empathetic, you pick up on subtle shifts. A delayed text, a colder tone, a slight withdrawal. Your nervous system registers it instantly. And because connection matters to you, your first impulse is often to act, to fix, to clarify, to soothe, to secure the bond before it feels like it's slipping. That impulse is human, but it is not always powerful. Reaction is fast. It is emotional. It is fueled by the need to reduce discomfort as quickly as possible. When you react, you are often trying to escape the anxiety that someone else's behavior triggered inside you. You send the long message. You demand reassurance. You over-explain your position. You attempt to control the outcome because uncertainty feels unbearable. Response, however, is slower. It requires breath. It requires space. It requires you to notice your emotions without being ruled by them. When you respond instead of react, you pause long enough to ask yourself, what is actually happening here? And what do I want to represent in this moment? That pause is power. In that pause, you shift from desperation to discernment. Instead of trying to manage someone else's perception of you, you begin managing your own state. Instead of scrambling to restore closeness, you observe whether the other person is willing to step forward on their own. The super empath often believes that strong emotion requires immediate expression, but true strength lies in emotional regulation. Not suppression, regulation. It means you feel everything fully, but you do not allow every feeling to dictate your behavior. When someone pulls away, reaction says, do something now or you'll lose them. Response says, if they are meant to stay, I don't need to panic. Reaction seeks control. Response demonstrates confidence. And confidence is magnetic. When you respond calmly, you create emotional stability. You show that your inner world is not easily shaken, that you do not crumble at the first sign of distance, that you can tolerate uncertainty without abandoning yourself. This steadiness shifts the dynamic in profound ways. Many unhealthy relationship patterns are fueled by reactivity. One person withdraws, the other chases. One criticizes, the other defends. One creates tension, the other rushes to repair it. It becomes a loop driven by emotional impulses rather than conscious choices. But when you respond instead of react, you break the loop. You allow space where there used to be urgency. You allow reflection where there used to be confrontation. You allow silence where there used to be over-explanation. And in that space, truth emerges. If someone values you, your calm response will invite them closer. They will feel the steadiness and match it. If someone thrives on chaos or imbalance, your composure may unsettle them. But that too is clarity. The super empath's strength is not in proving how much they care. It is in demonstrating that they care without losing control of themselves. Responding consciously also protects your dignity. Words spoken in reaction are often charged with anxiety. They can carry accusation, neediness, or emotional overwhelm. But words chosen after reflection carry intention. They reflect standards, they reflect boundaries, they reflect self-respect. When you respond, you are no longer trying to secure love through effort. You are evaluating whether love is being offered freely. This shift transforms you from someone seeking reassurance into someone embodying value. There is something undeniably powerful about a person who feels deeply yet moves deliberately, someone who can acknowledge their hurt without weaponizing it, someone who can express disappointment without pleading for validation, someone who can sit with discomfort without demanding immediate relief. That is maturity. That is emotional intelligence. That is strength. And once you begin choosing response over reaction, you will notice something extraordinary. The emotional pull that once controlled you begins to weaken. You are no longer at the mercy of every fluctuation. You are anchored. From that anchor point, you don't just participate in relationships, you shape them. One of the hardest lessons for a super empath to learn is that giving more does not always create more clarity. In fact, sometimes the more you give, the more confused the situation becomes. When you pour in extra effort, extra reassurance, extra communication in response to uncertainty, you may believe you are strengthening the bond, but often you are simply filling a space that was meant to reveal something important. When someone's energy shifts, your instinct may be to close the gap. You send the thoughtful message, you initiate the conversation. You try to restore the warmth. You increase your presence to compensate for their absence. It feels proactive. It feels loving. It feels responsible. But here is what often happens. Your increased effort masks the imbalance. If someone is uncertain, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable, your chasing softens the consequences of their behavior. They do not feel the distance they created because you immediately bridge it. They do not have to confront their inconsistency because you stabilize the connection for both of you. And so the confusion continues. Withdrawal of energy is not punishment. It is clarity in action. When you stop overcompensating, when you stop initiating every interaction, when you stop trying to decode and repair every subtle shift, you allow reality to surface. You allow the dynamic to reveal itself without interference. This is uncomfortable at first. Silence see and feel like risk. Pulling back can feel like losing control. But in truth, chasing was never control. It was anxiety disguised as effort. When you withdraw your energy with intention, something powerful happens. The illusion fades. If the connection was mutual, the other person will feel the space and step forward. They will initiate. They will question the distance. They will invest. If the connection was one-sided, the silence will expose it. Their lack of movement will speak louder than any excuse ever could. Clarity does not come from interrogation. It comes from observation. When you are constantly chasing, you are too busy acting to observe. You are too busy fixing to evaluate. You are too focused on maintaining the bond to ask whether the bond is balanced. Energy withdrawal restores perspective. It allows you to see whether your effort was being reciprocated or simply received. It shows you whether someone values your presence or merely enjoys your pursuit. It reveals whether their words align with their actions. There is a divine principle at play here. What you continually supply without requirement will rarely be appreciated at its true value. When something is always available, it can become assumed. When something requires effort, it becomes respected. By stepping back, you are not playing a game. You are resetting the standard. You are saying, without confrontation, I will not carry this alone. And that statement, even unspoken, is transformative. Many unhealthy dynamics survive because one person refuses to stop trying. The super empath often becomes the emotional engine of the relationship. They initiate hard conversations. They smooth over misunderstandings. They maintain connection. But a relationship powered by one person's effort will eventually exhaust that person. Withdrawal eventually is how you protect yourself from that exhaustio, and it is how you return responsibility to where it belongs, shared. In the quiet that follows your step back, you may feel anxiety. You may question whether you are doing the right thing. But if you resist the urge to rush back in, you will begin to see clearly. You will see whether they notice. You will see whether they care enough to act. You will see whether their interest was sustained by your effort or by their own intention. And that clarity is priceless, because once you see the truth, you can make decisions from strength rather than hope. Hope says, maybe if I try harder, it will change. Clarity says that effort is the answer. When you stop chasing, you stop distorting the data. You allow the situation to unfold naturally. And in that unfolding, the truth becomes undeniable. Sometimes that truth brings someone closer. Sometimes it sets you free. But either way, it frees you from confusion. And for a super empath, freedom from confusion is freedom from self-doubt. When you no longer overextend to maintain connection, you discover something profound. The right people do not require pursuit. They require participation. And participation cannot exist where only one person is running. Unhealthy attachment dynamics thrive on predictability, not healthy predictability, not healthy predictability, the kind where one person pulls away and the other rushes forward, where one becomes distant and the other becomes desperate to restore closeness. Over time, this pattern hardwires itself into the connection. It becomes familiar, automatic, almost scripted. For the super empath, this script is exhausting. You sense the shift the moment it happens, a delay in response. a subtle coolness, a change in tone, and without even realizing it, you move into your role. You lean in, you ask what's wrong. You reassure, you attempt to bring the energy back to safety. You believe you are protecting the bond. But what you may not realize is that you are reinforcing the cycle. In attachment theory, particularly in the work of John Bowlby, we understand that anxious and avoidant patterns often feed off each other. The more one pursues, the more the other distances. The more one distances, the more the other panics. It is not intentional cruelty, it is conditioning, and silence disrupts that conditioning. When you do not rush in to fix the disconnection, you interrupt the rhythm of the pattern. You refuse to play your assigned role. You resist the urge to regulate someone else's emotional withdrawal. And in so, you create something unfamiliar, space. That space can feel uncomfortable for both of you. For someone who is used to distancing, your silence removes the safety net of pursuit. They no longer feel the immediate reassurance that you will close the gap. They are left alone with their withdrawal. They have to decide whether to step forward or let the distance grow. For you, the super empath silence may feel like restraint. It may feel unnatural not to reach out, but this restraint is not suppression. It is transformation. It is the conscious choice to stop reinforcing a cycle that has been draining you. Silence forces accountability without confrontation. When you stop chasing, the dynamic cannot continue in the same way. Either the other person adjusts or the connection reveals its imbalance. There is no longer a buffer protecting them from the consequences of their inconsistency. And here is the powerful part. You do not need to lecture. You do not need to accuse. You do not need to threaten. Your changed behavior speaks for you. Unhealthy attachment patterns depend on emotional reactivity. They depend on predictable responses. When you become unpredictable, not erratic, but grounded, the system has to recalibrate. Instead of reacting to distance with urgency, you respond with calm. Instead of escalating anxiety, you regulate yourself. Instead of demanding reassurance, you observe behavior. That observation is clarity. If someone values you, they will notice the shift and lean in. They will initiate conversation. They will seek understanding. They will not allow silence to stretch into disconnection. But if someone relied on your pursuit to feel desired while offering little in return, your silence will feel uncomfortable to them. And that discomfort is revealing. You begin to see whether the connection was sustained by mutual desire or by your effort alone. Interrupting unhealthy dynamics also strengthens your nervous system. When you refuse to chase, you teach your body that distance does not equal danger. You prove to yourself that you can survive uncertainty, that you are not powerless in the face of someone else's withdrawal. This builds emotional resilience. The super empath often fears that silence will push someone away. But if someone only stays because you constantly pursue them, that is not security. That is dependency. True connection can withstand space. It can tolerate pauses. It does not collapse without constant reassurance. By interrupting the pattern, you give the relationship an opportunity to evolve. Either it rises into balance or it dissolves under its own imbalance. Both outcomes serve you because what you are truly breaking is not just a dynamic with another person. You are breaking a dynamic within yourself. The habit of over-functioning, the reflex to rescue, the belief that love must be maintained through effort rather than mutual investment. Silence becomes the reset button. It creates the possibility of a new pattern, one built on reciprocity rather than reaction, on steadiness rather than anxiety. And once you experience the peace that comes from stepping out of that old loop, you realize something profound. You were never responsible for holding the entire connection together. Emotional boundaries are not walls, they are standards. And standards are what elevate your value in any relationship. For the super empath, this can be one of the most difficult truths to embody, because your natural instinct is to understand, to forgive, to give the benefit of the doubt. You see the wounded child in the emotionally distant partner. You see the stress behind the inconsistency. You see the fear beneath the withdrawal. And because you see it, you feel compassion. But compassio, how without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. An emotional boundary is the quiet decision that your kindness will not come at the expense of your dignity. It is the awareness that understanding someone's pain does not require you to tolerate behavior that diminishes you. It is the recognition that empathy does not mean unlimited access. When you lack boundaries, you unintentionally lower your perceived value. Not because you are less worthy, but because you communicate that your time, energy, and emotional availability are endlessly accessible. And what is endlessly accessible is rarely treasured. Value is not created by playing hard to get. It is created by being clear about what you will and will not accept. When someone cancels repeatedly without consideration and you say nothing, you teach them that your time is flexible. When someone speaks to you dismissively and you brush it off to keep peace, you teach them that respect is optional. When someone gives you inconsistency and you respond with increased effort, you teach them that minimal investment earns maximum reward. Boundaries interrupt that lesson. They say calmly and firmly, "This does not work for me." Not with anger, not with drama, but with certainty. And certainty changes how people see you. There is something profoundly attractive about someone who knows their standards and does not apologize for them. Not rigid, not cold, but grounded. When you express a boundary without hostility, you demonstrate emotional maturity. You show that you are capable of love and self-protection at the same time. For the super empath, the fear is often this: if I set boundaries, I will push them away. But what pushes healthy people away is not boundaries, it is resentment. And resentment grows when boundaries are not set. When you continuously tolerate what hurts you, you begin to feel unseen, undervalued, and drained. Eventually, that suppressed frustration leaks out in subtle ways: distance, irritability, emotional exhaustion. Boundaries prevent resentment. They create clarity from the beginning. They allow the other person to understand the framework within which you operate. And within that framework, respect can grow. Emotional boundaries also elevate your internal value. When you uphold your standards, you strengthen your self-trust. You prove to yourself that your feelings matter, that your comfort matters, that your peace matters, and self-trust radiates outward. People can feel when someone respects themselves. When you stop accepting crumbs, you send a powerful message. I know what a full meal looks like. When you no longer overextend to keep someone comfortable, you show that your energy is precious. When you calmly disengage from behavior that disrespects you, you demonstrate that access to you is earned, not assumed. This does not mean you become unforgiving. It means you become discerning. Discerning is a higher form of empathy. It says, I understand your struggle, but I will not sacrifice myself to solve it. It says, I care about you, but I care about myself too. And that balance is magnetic. In relationships, value is often reflected in how much someone feels they could lose you if you tolerate everything. If you never pull back, if you never require effort, there is no perceived risk. But when your boundaries are clear, when your presence is steady yet conditional upon respect, your absence carries weight, not as a threat, as truth. Emotional boundaries elevate your value because they transform you from someone seeking approval into someone offering partnership. You are no longer asking, do you choose me? You are evaluating, do you align with my standards? That shift is powerful. It moves you from insecurity to authority within your own life, from overgiving to balanced exchange, from emotional exhaustion to sustainable connection. And once you experience the strength that comes from standing firmly in your standards, you realize that boundaries are not barriers to love. They are the foundation that allows love to thrive without costing you yourself. When you are a super empath, you often become the emotional mirror in every relationship. You sense shifts, you anticipate needs, you smooth tension before it erupts. You become so skilled at adjusting yourself to maintain harmony that the other person rarely has to confront their own patterns. Your flexibility cushions their avoidance. Your understanding softens their inconsistency. Your reassurance neutralizes their emotional distance. And without meaning to, you make it easy for them not to grow. Detachment changes that. Detachment is not indifference. It is not coldness. It is not the absence of care. It is the decision to step back emotionally so that you are no longer over-functioning for the relationship. It is the refusal to keep compensating for someone else's lack of effort. And when you do this, something powerful happens. The spotlight shifts. When you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, stop managing the emotional climate, the other person is left alone with their own behavior. There is no longer a buffer absorbing the consequences, no one smoothing over their withdrawal, no one translating their mixed signals into something more hopeful. Your detachment removes the comfort they unconsciously relied on. And in that discomfort, reflection begins. Many emotionally avoidant or inconsistent individuals do not change because they are forced to, but because they are confronted with the reality of loss. As long as you remain available, regardless of how they show up, there is no urgency, no reason to examine their habits, no incentive to stretch beyond their comfort zone. But when your energy shifts, when you are calm, polite, yet no longer leaning in, they feel it. They may test it. They may even attempt to provoke a reaction to see if you will return to your previous pattern. But if your detachment is grounded and consistent, it sends a clear message. Access to me requires reciprocity. And that message is transformative. Detachment forces the other person to ask themselves difficult questions. Why does this feel different? Why aren't they reacting the way they used to? Am I about to lose something I assumed would always be there? Those questions open a door that chasing never could door. When you were pursuing, their focus was on managing your reaction. When you detach, their focus turns inward. This is where growth becomes possible. They must evaluate their effort. They must confront their fear of intimacy. They must decide whether protecting their comfort is worth losing the connection. You are no longer distracting them from that decision with emotional intensity. For the super empath, this can feel risky. You fear that detachment will simply make them drift away, and sometimes it does. But if someone drifts when you stop overextending, it reveals a truth that was already there. They were anchored to your effort, not to their own commitment. Detachment protects you from carrying a relationship alone. It also strengthens your self-worth. When you detach, you communicate to yourself that your energy is valuable, that your emotional labor is not automatic, that you deserve mutual investment. And that internal shift changes how you show up in every interaction. You become observant instead of reactive. You listen to actions more than promises. You evaluate consistency rather than chemistry. You move from hoping someone will rise to your level to calmly watching whether they do. There is a quiet power in that stance. When someone realizes they must step forward to keep you, respect begins to form. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. You demonstrated that your presence is a privilege, and privileges are not taken for granted when they can be lost. Detachment also reveals your strength to yourself. You discover that you can survive without constant reassurance, that you can tolerate space without panic, that you are not dependent on someone else's attention to feel secure. This is liberation, because once you detach from the outcome, you are no longer trying to control whether someone chooses you. You are simply observing whether they do. And that observation removes pressure both from you and from them. If they rise, the connection evolves into something more balanced. If they do not, you walk away with clarity instead of confusion. In either case, you win, because the moment you stop carrying the emotional weight for two people is the moment you realize you were never meant to. True strength is rarely loud. It is rarely about persuasion or proving a point. It does not demand attention through chaos or urgency. For the super empath, strength is often misunderstood. Because you feel deeply, because your emotions are finely tuned, the world assumes that your power is in how much you give, how much you understand, how much you absorb. But the reality is far different. True strength is demonstrated through calm certainty, not frantic action. It is measured not by how much you chase, but by how firmly you stand in your own worth. Calm certainty begins with self-trust. It begins with the knowledge that your presence has value, independent of anyone else's approval. When you feel deeply, it is tempting to measure your worth by how others respond to your care. A delayed message can feel catastrophic. A withdrawn text can feel like rejection. But calm strength is rooted in the awareness that these external signals do not define you. Your value is inherent. Your integrity is intact. Your emotions are a gift, not a bargaining chip. This certainty shows up in how you carry yourself in relationships. When someone is inconsistent, you do not panic. You do not over-explain. You do not rush to bridge gaps that are not yours to close. Instead, you hold steady. You communicate your needs and your boundaries clearly, but without aggression or pleading. You allow silence to serve its purpose, and in that silence, the other person feels the weight of their own choices. They are no longer cushioned by your constant effort, and the truth of the dynamic emerges naturally. Strength expressed this way is magnetic. It is subtle, yet undeniable. It does not scream for attention because it does not need to. People feel it in your steadiness. They sense it in the way you respond, or sometimes in the way you do not respond. They notice that you do not bend to every fluctuation, that you do not crumble under uncertainty, that you do not sacrifice yourself for approval. There is a quiet authority in this approach, one that commands respect without coercion. Moreover, true strength protects your heart. When you choose calm certainty, you are no longer giving from depletion. You are no longer sacrificing your peace for temporary reassurance. You are not reacting to emotional turbulence with chaos, but meeting it with discernment. This protects you from burnout, from resentment, from becoming entangled in unhealthy patterns. Your power grows not through domination, but through equilibrium, the ability to maintain your integrity regardless of external chaos. Calm certainty also sets the stage for alignment. When you embody this type of strength, you attract people who can meet you at your level, those who are emotionally capable, respectful, and willing to step forward, will recognize and honor it. Those who are not will reveal themselves through their inaction, and you will gain clarity without a word. In this sense, strength functions as both filter and beacon. It protects you while simultaneously drawing the right energy toward you. This strength is transformative, not just for others, but for yourself. It rewires your relationship with attachment, desire, and emotional investment. You stop measuring love by the intensity of effort and begin measuring it by the quality of reciprocity. You learn that your compassion is not a weakness to be exploited, but a gift to be shared consciously. You recognize that your energy is sacred and that maintaining it requires discernment as much as generosity. Finally, strength expressed through calm certainty carries a divine resonance. It aligns with the principle that what is rooted in authenticity does not need to prove itself. It mirrors the natural order. Those who are steady, who honor themselves, who act from awareness rather than impulse, create the conditions for healthy relationships. They do not control. They do not manipulate. They simply embody clarity, integrity, and presence. For the super empath, the journey to this strength is the ultimate lesson. It is the realization that power is not in chasing or convincing, but in knowing your value and standing firm. It is the understanding that love does not require sacrifice of self, but flourishes where respect and alignment exist. Calm certainty is not a tactic, it is a way of being. And in mastering it, the super empath transforms their relationships, their sense of self, and their experience of life itself. Thank you for trusting me with your thoughts and time. Your presence made this conversation meaningful. Wishing you clarity, strength, and joy on your journey. Goodbye and take care.